this cabin right here that Kris Jenner's at? Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell.
I now hold the opinion that Kim Kardashian is a prostitute, and I'm not going to edit this opinion. Kim Kardashian is a prostitute. Her mother is a pimp.
This federal RICO though, on KK and Kris. Ooh, the federal RICO I'm about to drop. Anybody know Kim and cool with Kim?
Imagine this. You're scrolling late at night, half asleep, and suddenly a clip pops up of Kanye, years ago, ranting about Kris Jenner. And tonight, that rant suddenly hits very, very different. An ex-Yeezy staffer has allegedly stepped forward, claiming Kanye wasn't just lashing out during a messy breakup. He was reacting to something he believed was much darker behind the scenes. According to these new claims, Kanye had people looking into Kris and her connections, and what he thought he found left him terrified for his daughters and furious at the machine around him. At the same time, social media is still buzzing over that bizarre, ultra-exclusive birthday bash Kris just had, the one packed with billionaires, power players, and familiar names tied to old Epstein headlines. The timing, the guest list, the secrecy, fans are calling it creepy, suspicious, and way too convenient.
Good American on the outside. I've got Skims on the inside.
Wait, say that again?
As the ultimate Hollywood strategist, and whispers comparing her to Hollywood's Maxwell. Are these just wild conspiracy theories spinning out of control? Or did everyone ignore red flags for years? Tonight, we're breaking it all down. So when this new complaint from the ex-Yeezy staffer started circulating, it didn't just come out of nowhere. It landed on the internet like a slow-motion explosion. People were already side-eyeing that old clip of Kanye talking about Kris and saying he was scared for his daughters. But this time, the context felt different. Suddenly, there was a name attached, a job title, and a story about what was happening behind those glossy fashion show photos. And remember, everything we're talking about tonight is based on what this former staffer is claiming and what fans online are speculating. Nothing here has been proven in court, and the people being discussed have not admitted to any of this. We are breaking down how the story is being told, how fans are reacting, and why so many feel like they might have missed the signs. According to the complaint that Gossip Pages picked up, this ex-staffer worked closely with Kanye during one of the most chaotic eras of his life. They say the world saw an artist posting wild captions and going on unpredictable rants, but behind the scenes, there was a man pacing studio floors, talking about his children, and telling the people
for the culture, y'all don't want me, because I feel like the culture didn't stand up for me when I asked y'all to.
What did you ask for the culture to stand up for? No.
These women kidnapped my child in broad daylight.
Around the Kardashian brand. And according to this person, Kris's name was always right in the middle. They claim Kanye started putting pieces together in a way that freaked even his own team out. It wasn't just about old reality show storylines or brand deals anymore. The staffer says he was asked to pull anything he could find about Kris's social connections, charity ties, and those mysterious friends of the family who showed up at events, vanished for years, and then popped back up in expensive photo spreads. He talks about going through articles, court filings, leaked emails, and old paparazzi shots.
Look inside Kris Jenner's 70th billionaire birthday bash, where the police were allegedly called. Jeff Bezos hosted at his $165 million mansion in Beverly Hills. The theme was a play on James Bond's 007. Inside the party, you could find all the billionaires, including Mark Zuckerberg, Oprah Winfrey, Bill Gates, Prince Harry, and Meghan Markle. Her daughter and alleged billionaire Kylie Jenner, Kim, Kendall, Khloe, and of course all of Kylie's friends. For the Housewife fans, funny how Lou M. Taylor's here, Vin Diesel, Hailey Bieber, Justin Bieber, who walked out with mysterious white stuff on his pants, and many more. The guests received 2 gifts, Wayfair Ray-Ban, and special Kris Jenner Dunkin' Donuts. Bruno Mars played, and this is when the police showed up. TMZ and the Daily Mail are alleging the cops came several times during Kris Jenner's birthday bash because of the Bruno Mars performance. I don't mean to be mean or negative, but this party gave extremely bad vibes. And if you watch this video back, or just go look online, most everyone walking in, including her daughter, were trying to cover their faces. I don't know.
Insists that wasn't just emotional word vomit. It was coming from a man who believed he had seen enough to fear that his kids could be pushed into situations he couldn't pull them back from. Emotions ran high, and the family was left divided between those who thought he needed help and those who quietly wondered if maybe he was noticing something they didn't want to think about. The ex-employee claims that Kanye's obsession with protecting his daughters became the main source of friction. They describe meetings that started about sneakers and music, but always ended with him talking about North and Chicago, about the way cameras followed them, about the way every cute moment got turned into a brand moment.
Continue to meet with him over several years.
and that, in other words, a number of meetings. What did you do when you found out about his background?
Well, I said I regretted having those dinners, and there's absolutely nothing new on that.
Is there a lesson for you, for anyone else looking at this?
Well, he's dead, so in general, you always have to be careful. I'm very proud of what we've done in philanthropy. Very proud.
The story was ever allowed to be told. Online, people are split. Some think the ExYeezy worker is just chasing clout, trying to attach themselves to viral drama. Others feel the opposite and say it matches exactly what they always felt under the surface. Comments are full of lines like, "This makes Kanye look less crazy and more desperate," and "I never liked the way they laughed off his concerns about the kids." A lot of viewers are saying the emotional stakes here are what hits hardest. At the center of every rumor and every alleged pattern is a father who believed he was running out of time to protect his daughters from a world he no longer trusted. The staffer also claims that at one point lawyers were involved, not because there was a smoking gun, but because Kanye allegedly wanted to know what he could legally do if he thought his children were in danger. They describe conference calls, tense conversations about guardianship, and people around him warning that if he kept pushing, he'd be painted as the problem. Whether or not any of those legal moves went anywhere, we don't know. What we do know is that fans remember how quickly the narrative turned into Kanye is out of control every time he pushed back against the family's carefully managed image. And this is where that chilling comparison from the online chatter starts creeping in. Some users have started using the word recruiter when talking about Kris, not as something proven, but as a metaphor for the way she seems to guide young women into rooms filled with powerful men and cameras. They point to the way she curated relationships, parties, and photo ops over the years,
turning her daughters into global brands by placing them in proximity to the most influential people on the planet. To some viewers, that looks like smart business. To others, especially after reading the ex-staffer's claims, it feels less like management and more like something they don't even want to name out loud. In the middle of all this, there's one detail the staffer shares that really rattled people who read the complaint. They say there was a moment where Kanye allegedly looked at a photo of his daughter and went quiet. Instead of exploding or ranting, he just stared. Then he told the room, "They are not going to turn my baby into a storyline." According to this ex-employee, that was when he decided he couldn't just sit back and trust that the family brand knew where to draw the line. In his mind, the line had already been crossed years ago, and he didn't want his girls to be the next chapter. And that brings us to the point where the Yeezy staffer claims everything shifted from uncomfortable to disturbing. Because right around the time these conversations were happening behind closed doors, preparations were underway for one of the most extravagant celebrations the family had ever pulled off. A birthday that wasn't just about cake and speeches, but about gathering a certain kind of guest list, the kind of names that make people on the outside whisper, scroll through old headlines, and wonder what exactly binds all of these faces together. The pictures from that birthday night looked like something out of a movie. Huge black cars lining a quiet street in the hills, security everywhere, flashes bouncing off tinted windows, while famous faces hurried past cameras with their heads down. On paper, it was just a milestone celebration, another over-the-top party for a woman who built an empire on spectacle. But once people started lining the images up against the timing of those leaked emails and old headlines, the mood online shifted. What should have been just another glitzy Hollywood evening suddenly felt like something else. Gossip accounts started posting clips from outside the mansion where the event was held, pointing out who arrived when, who seemed tense, who refused to look up at photographers. Fans paused the footage, zoomed in, and started circling faces in red. There were tech giants, media legends, royals, and longtime Hollywood names all slipping into the same building to celebrate Kris. One comment under a viral post summed up the reaction perfectly. "I have never seen this specific mix of people in one room before, and I don't like the way it feels." Another person wrote, "Since when do these billionaires party with reality TV families for fun?" That was the question that kept getting repeated. People aren't surprised when entertainers hang out with each other. Actors, singers, influencers, all blending together at award show after parties is normal. What caught everyone off guard here was the combination. Powerful figures connected to finance, tech, royal families, and old scandals, all turning up to toast the woman who turned a leaked tape and a family show into a global business. For some viewers, it just looked like proof of Kris's influence. For others, especially those who had just read the ex-Yeezy workers' claims, it looked like confirmation of a more unsettling theory. Inside, according to party insiders who spoke to blogs, everything was planned down to the smallest detail. A theme inspired by spy films, a custom menu, branded gifts, and a guest list so tight that even people used to celebrity events were impressed. Live music, ice sculptures, private performances. It sounded like the kind of night that would usually have the internet fawning and asking for more photos. But this time, even Stan accounts felt uneasy. There was a kind of stiffness in the body language at the entrance. Several guests shielded their faces in a way that felt less like, "Don't ruin my makeup," and more like, "I don't want proof I was here." As the images spread, fans started pulling up that old interview clip where one well-known guest was asked about their meetings with a disgraced figure and gave a very careful answer. The clip got stitched onto footage of them entering Kris's party with captions like, "So we're just ignoring this?" and "Same circle, different location." Again, none of this proves anything. These are people who operate in the same high-level social and business networks, and being photographed in the same place does not mean they are doing anything wrong. But emotionally, for an audience already primed by rumors, it felt like puzzle pieces sliding into place. This is where the comparison that inspired the video's title really started to spread. In comment sections and long threads, viewers began using that loaded nickname for Kris, not in a legal sense, but as shorthand for what they felt she represented in celebrity culture. To them, she was the one who organized, connected, negotiated, and placed her daughters in rooms where the stakes were sky high. They pointed out how often she's praised as the mastermind, the strategist, the architect of every relationship and every photo op. In a flattering article, those words sound like compliments. In a suspicious thread, the same language takes on a much darker tone. One user wrote, "People don't understand how deep her network must go to pull a guest list like that. You don't just accidentally collect that many powerful people in one space." Another added, "If you think this is just a birthday party and not a meeting of people checking in on each other, I don't know what to tell you." Again, these are feelings, not facts, but they show how intense the distrust has become. The story isn't just about whether Kris planned an innocent celebration or something more. It's about how little faith a chunk of the public now has in the circle she moves in. While these images swirled across timelines, clips of Kanye talking about his kids reappeared in duet videos and edits. Fans would play a short piece of him saying he didn't want certain people around his daughters, then cut to footage of those same people entering the party. The message was clear. Maybe he saw this world up close and decided his children didn't belong in it. In some videos, creators spoke directly to the camera, saying things like, "This is why he sounded so desperate," and "When you realize he was trying to pull his kids out while everybody else kept smiling for the cameras, it hits different." The ExYeezy workers' story feeds right into that interpretation. They describe how, during the time all of this was building, Kanye allegedly became obsessed with the idea of rooms and gatekeepers. He would talk about how certain doors stayed closed for most people, but his family had access to them, and that access came with a price. According to the staffer, he believed Kris had learned exactly which rooms to walk her daughters into, and exactly what they needed to sacrifice in order to stay inside. He didn't always phrase it gently. He was emotional, angry, and often blunt. But beneath all the noise was the same fear, that the next generation would be treated like currency. Some fans argue that this is unfair. They point out that Kris is far from the only manager-mother in show business, and that her children are adults who make their own choices. They remind people that having famous and wealthy guests at a huge birthday party is not a crime. It's standard in that world. Others say that obsessing over photos and drawing sinister conclusions from every angle is exactly how conspiracy culture spins out of control. In their eyes, the comparison to notorious figures is irresponsible because it suggests a level of involvement that there is no public proof of right now. Still, the emotional reaction refuses to die down. As more influencers cover the topic, their comment sections fill with viewers talking about bad vibes, dark energy, and a nagging feeling that something about the entire night was off. They point out tiny details, like how few genuine smiles there seemed to be at the entrance, or how quickly some outlets moved on from covering the event, almost as if they didn't want to dwell on who was there. Again, none of this is hard evidence, but people don't always respond to evidence. They respond to patterns, and right now, in their minds, Kris sits at the center of too many circles. The party becomes a symbol in the story. It represents power, secrecy, and the line between public fantasy and private reality. On the surface, it was a night of sequins, designer gowns, and champagne. Underneath, at least according to online chatter and the ex-employee's framing, it stands in for a question that makes people uncomfortable. Who decides which young women get turned into icons? And what does that process really look like when the cameras aren't rolling? The staffer's account makes it sound like Kanye believed the answer to that question was uglier than most people wanted to admit. He allegedly told his team that once you're in those circles, there's a silent agreement about what you won't talk about. Relationships, arrangements, favors, introductions. None of it written down, all of it understood. Whether that's accurate or just how it felt to him, we don't know. What we do know is that his distrust of Kris seems to have been rooted in the belief that she was not just navigating that world, but thriving in it.
So when viewers look at that birthday footage after reading the complaint, they don't just see a rich woman having a big night. They see what they think is the latest chapter in a long story about access, influence, and loyalty. They think about how hard Kanye tried to separate his children from that environment and how quickly he was painted as unstable every time he questioned it. They think about how many scandals over the years have been repackaged as plot twists, spin-offs, and new business ventures. And they wonder how much pain and compromise sits beneath the glossy edits. At the same time, there's a shared sense of exhaustion. Many people watching this drama unfold admit that they feel trapped between not wanting to believe the worst and not wanting to be naive. They're tired of hearing about powerful circles where accountability never seems to stick. They're tired of being told everything is fine when their instincts scream that something is wrong. For them, this ExYeezy workers' claims, Kanye's old outbursts, and the eerie vibes around that elaborate party all blend into one unnerving picture. None of this gives us a clear, simple answer about what really goes on behind those gates. And legally, emotionally, and morally, that answer matters. But for now, most viewers only have fragments to work with: leaked complaints, archival footage, fan theories, and carefully curated social media posts. And hanging over all of it is that uncomfortable question that refuses to go away. The one people keep repeating under their breath as they rewatch the clips and scroll through the photos, trying to read between the lines. As people were still replaying clips from that party and arguing in the comments, another piece of the puzzle started trending again, something many had forgotten about until creators began stitching it into their breakdowns. It wasn't a video this time, but old articles and financial reports about Kris's church. The name sounded gentle and harmless when it first launched, almost like a small local community space. But when fans started really looking at the numbers, the reactions got a lot louder. Creators on social platforms pulled up those stories from years ago explaining how the church supposedly worked. They talked about the membership fees, the expectation that people contribute a large chunk of their income, and the way the entire thing operated under the umbrella of charity. The more they explained it, the more the comments filled up with viewers using words like loophole and scheme. One person wrote, "Sorry, since when is a church a luxury subscription?" Another added, "Funny how the same family that lives in mansions also gets tax relief from donations to mom's church." Again, it's important to say this clearly. None of this proves that anyone broke the law. There are rich people all over the world who use legal structures to pay less tax. There are churches and charities that do things most ordinary people find unfair but perfectly legal. What fans are responding to here is not a signed confession. They're reacting to patterns and vibes, to the image of a family selling a certain kind of lifestyle while quietly moving money around in ways that feel convenient for them. The ExYeezy workers account plugs straight into that feeling. According to them, Kanye believed the church was a symbol of something much bigger. The staffer claims Kanye would pace around the studio talking about how money, image, and faith had all been wrapped together into one shiny package. He supposedly said that in their world, even spirituality could become branding, and that scared him because he didn't want his kids growing up thinking every sacred thing could be turned into a business write-off. The staffer remembers him saying, "If they can turn God into a marketing tool, what do you think they'll do with my daughters' faces?" In the complaint, the ex-employee describes a moment when someone on the team tried to calm him down by saying that this is just how the game works at a certain level. They allegedly told him that big names donate through their own foundations, move money between companies, and use charities to soften their image and reduce their bills. According to the staffer, Kanye didn't accept that explanation. He thought that once you start normalizing that kind of financial gymnastics, it becomes easier to hide other things in the same maze. He saw the church, the real estate, and the brand deals as different arms of the same machine. Fans picked up that thread quickly. They began revisiting coverage about the family's property moves. Houses bought, remodeled, flipped, and sometimes left half-finished only for another project to pop up somewhere else. Creators started making timelines of every reported house purchase tied to the family, overlaying them with news about business launches, legal filings, and public controversies. In the comments, people speculated about what it all meant. Either they're just addicted to building and flipping, one viewer wrote, or these houses are chess pieces in a much bigger game. Again, this is speculation, not proof. But the emotional truth for many watchers is that the constant construction now feels less like an aesthetic obsession and more like part of a pattern they've been trained to distrust. The ExYeezy worker says that inside their circle, Kanye would point at these overlapping money stories and say it was all about control. Not just financial control, but narrative control. The idea that if you own the house, the brand, the charity, and the storyline, you can redirect almost any crisis. You can turn scandal into a product launch. You can turn an accusation into a plot twist. And if you can do that, he worried, what happens when the crisis involves his children instead of an adult who chose this life? That fear, according to the staffer, is where the tension with Corey really began to spike. Corey had long been seen as a calm, steady presence in Kris's life, the quiet partner who showed up at events, stood by her side, and rarely spoke publicly about anything serious. But within the ex-employee's story, Corey is painted as something else entirely, a gatekeeper, someone who understands how to move in powerful circles, who knows which rooms are safe and which ones aren't, and who keeps a close eye on anything that threatens the smooth running of the wider network. The staffer claims
that Kanye didn't trust him from the start. They describe meetings where Corey would sit silently, watching every exchange, only speaking when logistics or security came up. To some, that is exactly what a partner and protector is supposed to do. To Kanye, at least from the staffer's perspective, it felt like something more calculated. The ex-employee says Kanye would leave a room and immediately ask the team, "Did you see how he looked at me when I mentioned the kids?" Again, this is one person's perception. We don't know what was actually in Corey's mind. But the staffer is convinced that Kanye saw him less as a boyfriend and more as an operator. That fearing reportedly exploded during a private argument, which the ex-staffer claims to have partially overheard. According to their story, voices were raised. Kanye was heard saying that he didn't want Corey near his daughters. Another voice, described as calm and firm, responded that he was being paranoid and disrespectful. The staffer says you could hear years of resentment in the way Kanye fired back. He allegedly accused them of trying to turn his family into a permanent storyline, something he could never opt out of, and insisted that he would rather be painted as unstable in the press than be quiet while decisions were made without him. Later, clips of Kanye calling Corey something like an infiltrator or implying he was placed in the family for a reason resurfaced online. Those comments were widely mocked when they first came out. People said he was reaching, being messy, or just lashing out. Now, when fans hear the ex-employee talk about how isolated he felt, they see those old quotes in a new light. Not as a factual claim about secret agencies, but as the emotional language of a man who felt like every time he tried to pull away from the machine, someone was there to nudge him back into line. Still, not everyone buys it. Plenty of viewers argue that this is just another example of a former employee trying to profit off a famous name. They point out that we only hear one side of the story here, Kanye's side, filtered through someone who worked for him. They argue that it's easy to paint Kris as a mastermind and Corey as a mysterious handler when you're building a dramatic narrative, but much harder to prove any of it. They remind everyone watching that speculation can ruin reputations just as easily as actual misconduct. That's why throughout this entire saga, more thoughtful creators keep repeating the same reminder. These are allegations and interpretations, not confirmed facts. What we have are complaints, rumors, leaked audio, and fan theories layered on top of each other. What we don't have is a clear official record that supports the most extreme claims being made in comment sections. It's important to keep that difference in mind, because the emotional stakes are high not just for the people involved, but for the audience trying to make sense of it all. And yet, the reason this story has gripped so many people isn't just the names or the money or the parties. It's the clash between two very different types of power. On one side, there's Kris and her network, polished, strategic, deeply tied into the worlds of fashion, media, and wealth. On the other, there's Kanye, as described by the ex-employee, volatile, emotional, often self-destructive, but determined to protect his children even if it meant burning bridges in public. Viewers are drawn to that clash because it mirrors a smaller version of battles they feel in their own lives. Who really has control over them? Who gets to write their story? Is it the calm, well-connected person who always seems to have a plan, or the raw voice yelling that something isn't right even when it makes everything messy? That emotional resonance keeps the conversation alive, even when no new hard evidence appears. People aren't just talking about Kris and Kanye. They're talking about the systems they see in their own workplaces, families, and communities, wrapped in the glitter of celebrity drama. The ExYeezy staffer, whether you believe them or not, captured that feeling perfectly in one line that has been quoted over and over in breakdown videos. They say that at one point, after another round of headlines painting him as unhinged, Kanye looked at the team and said, "If I stop talking, they win. If I keep talking, they call me crazy. Either way, they don't want to hear what I'm really trying to say." For fans who already distrusted the family brand, that line feels like the key to everything. For others, it's just another emotional outburst from someone who has always struggled with the spotlight. And so the debate keeps spinning. Is this all just a tangled mess of hurt feelings, business conflicts, and personal grudges dressed up as a conspiracy? Or is there a deeper pattern here that people are only now feeling brave enough to connect out loud? The ex-employee's claims about investigations, guest lists, churches, and gatekeepers don't answer that question. They just make it louder.
As viewers keep watching, replaying, and arguing, one thing is certain: this is no longer just about old clips and a single birthday party. It has become a test of how much trust anyone still has left in a world where everything is curated, but very little feels truly honest. As the ExYeezy workers' story kept spreading, the reactions inside the fandom started to split into clear camps. One side felt like this was confirmation of everything they had always suspected about Kris and the way she moves. The other side felt like this was just another attempt to tear down a woman who built an empire in a world that has never liked powerful mothers. Both sides were loud, emotional, and absolutely convinced they were seeing the truth. Creators began reenacting imagined conversations between the family behind closed doors. In one popular dramatized version, people picture Kris sitting at a long kitchen island, phone in hand, scrolling through the latest commentary clips. Somebody playing her voice says, very calmly, "We've survived worse, we will survive this." Then another creator, acting as one of her daughters, fires back with, "But Mom, they are calling you something I can't even repeat. Do you understand how serious this sounds?" The fictional Kris looks up, unimpressed, and replies, "What sounds serious is losing control of the story. That's what you should be worried about." These imagined scenes don't claim to be real, but they resonate because fans feel like they line up with everything they have seen on their screens for years. The cool strategist versus the emotional children, the mother who turns crises into ratings, the daughters who sometimes look tired even as they smile for the cameras. The ex-employee's claims slot into that picture like a missing piece. To many viewers, the idea that Kris would be more focused on the narrative than the accusations sounds painfully believable, even if nobody can prove those private conversations actually happened. Meanwhile, other dramatized clips flip the script. In those, people imagine one of the daughters confronting Kanye instead, asking him why he keeps throwing their mother under the bus in public instead of handling things quietly. Someone playing his voice answers, "I tried quiet. Quiet didn't work. Quiet just let them put more gloss on it." The fictional daughter says, "You are making us look crazy." And he fires back, "They already decided what you look like. I'm trying to stop them from deciding who my girls become." Again, none of this is real dialogue. It's the audience pouring their own feelings and fears into these characters, using them like mirrors. As the story snowballed, a new wave of posts began focusing on how fans themselves might be part of the problem. Some creators pointed out that every click, every binge watch, every share of a shocking headline is what keeps the machine running. They asked
questions about complicity. If Kris is as powerful as people say, who gave her that power? If the family brand is built on public appetite for scandal and glamour, who kept feeding that appetite for over a decade? Suddenly, the drama didn't feel so distant. Viewers had to admit that they, too, played a role in turning real people into ongoing storylines. The ExYeezy staffer touches on that in one quoted section of their complaint, where they allegedly describe how Kanye would talk about the audience as if it were another character in the room. He supposedly said the crowd loves a fall and loves a comeback, but hates when someone questions the whole show. According to the staffer, he believed that calling out the system made him more dangerous than any single scandal ever could. Whether that is accurate or not, it explains why so many people now look back at those chaotic years and wonder if they misread what they were watching. Then came another twist that sent comment sections into overdrive. A separate source, described by some outlets as close to the wider circle, quietly suggested that the ex-employee might be stretching the truth to make their time at Yeezy sound more dramatic than it really was. This person implied that while there were definitely tense moments and loud arguments, there was never a formal, organized investigation into Kris. They framed it more as a stressed-out artist venting and asking his staff to look up public information, not a serious operation. This pushed the conversation into an even more complicated place. Suddenly, viewers were stuck between two very different stories. One painted the picture of a man desperately trying to protect his family from a powerful network he no longer trusted. The other suggested that this man was overwhelmed, angry, and sometimes careless with his words, leaving people around him to interpret his outbursts as bigger than they were. Somewhere between those two versions, the truth might sit. But the internet rarely has patience for nuance, especially when the words recruiter and Maxwell are being thrown around. Fans started asking themselves a new question. If it turns out the ex-staffer exaggerated parts of their experience, does that mean all of the unease around Kris suddenly disappears? Most people agreed it doesn't. Even those who doubted the employee's reliability still felt something uncomfortable around the way this family's story has been told over the years. The constant camera access, the way deeply personal moments are packaged as content, and the seemingly endless parade of brand tie-ins have left a lot of onlookers with a lingering sense that the line between family and product blurred a long time ago. At the core of all of this is another emotional twist that often gets overshadowed by the louder conspiracy talk. It is the idea that no matter how much money, fame, or power is involved, there are still children in the middle. The ex-employee's complaint keeps circling back to that point.
They describe a father who might have used clumsy words, even hurtful ones at times, but who was deeply afraid of his girls becoming props in a world he no longer believed in. They describe a grandmother who, in their view, has spent her life turning personal pain into ratings. Between them stands a generation of kids growing up surrounded by cameras and whispered accusations they never asked for. The emotional stakes there are what keep people glued to this story. Every time a new clip of one of the children goes viral, there is a split second where the audience reacts with heart emoji comments and shares the moment as cute content. Then the darker side of the fandom shows up, asking, do they ever get to say no? Who decides what gets posted? Who protects them when the internet turns? It is that tension between adoration and discomfort that makes the ex-staffer's claims hit so hard, whether people believe all the details or not. Some viewers have started using this saga as a reminder to be more careful with how they consume celebrity families in general. They talk about taking breaks from gossip pages, muting certain tags, and asking themselves whether they really need to watch yet another breakdown of somebody else's worst day. At the same time, others lean in even harder, convinced that if they just analyze enough clips and connect enough dots, they will uncover the hidden truth behind the polished images. The story becomes less about the people involved and more about the thrill of the hunt. Through it all, Kris herself remains mostly silent, at least publicly, about the darker accusations floating around her name. She posts curated photos, brand updates, and family moments, as she always has. There are no long statements addressing the most extreme claims, no raw live videos pushing back against the narratives. To some, that silence looks like dignity. To others, it feels like careful strategy. In the absence of direct answers, people project their own assumptions onto the quiet. And that brings everything back to the question at the heart of this entire conversation. Was Kanye right all along? Was he seeing something real and ugly beneath the surface? Or was he a man in pain, mixing real grievances with exaggerated fears? Is Kris simply a sharp, relentless manager who understands entertainment better than anyone else? Or is she part of something darker, as some online voices claim? At this point, the public still does not have a definitive answer, and maybe never will. What they do have is a pile of allegations, leaked documents, old interviews, and a powerful set of emotions swirling around them. Fear for the children, suspicion of the wealthy, fascination with downfall stories, a complicated kind of sympathy for someone who tried to shout warnings while being branded unstable. And beneath all of that, a quiet question that viewers rarely say out loud, but often feel in their gut when they scroll past yet another glamorous family photo. If this is what the dream looks like on camera, what does it really cost when the lights go off and everybody goes home? So now that we've gone through all of this, from the ExYeezy workers' claims to the strange party guest lists and the uneasy feelings around money, faith, and family, it really comes down to you. You've heard how some people online think this all makes Kanye less unhinged and more like someone trying to sound an alarm. You've also heard how others believe this is just another round of unproven accusations and emotional storytelling. And remember, everything we've talked about here is based on complaints, old reports, and public speculation. None of this has been confirmed in court, and the people involved have not admitted to the accusations. We're reacting to what's being said, not declaring anyone guilty of anything. If you're watching this and you felt that knot in your stomach at certain moments, ask yourself why. Is it because of these specific names, or because the whole industry feels shady to you now? Do you think Kanye was seeing something real beneath the surface, or do you feel like pain, ego, and chaos twisted his view of the people around him? Do you think Kanye is just a sharp strategist in a cutthroat business, or do the patterns fans point out make you uncomfortable? I really want to know where you stand after hearing all this. Do you believe the ex-employee story, or do you think it's being stretched for attention? Do you feel more sympathy for Kanye, for the kids, for the wider family, or for the people who are tired of endless speculation? If you made it this far into the video, make sure you hit like so more people can join this conversation. Subscribe if you want deeper breakdowns of the stories everyone is whispering about, but nobody is fully unpacking. And drop your thoughts in the comments below, uncensored but respectful. Was Kanye right all along, or is the truth more complicated than any?
Of us want to admit